Berlin is turning into a city where you can be exhausted, broke, and doing everything right, and still get pushed out of the normal world. You don't see the collapse at first. You see rules, signs, patrols, closed doors. Then you notice the same bags in the same corridors at the same hour, like the city is running shifts for survival. But here's where it gets ugly. Once you lose an address, the paperwork starts eating your time. Letters don't find you. Appointments slide. Waiting lists don't care. And while you're stuck, the street becomes your holding cell. In 2026, this isn't random. It's a system. Let's expose it. The morning routine. Start with the easiest thing to notice. In the quiet stretch before the city really wakes up, people don't settle in. They do the opposite. They fold things fast, tighten bags, and get moving. You see it again and again, like a habit. The reason is simple. When the foot traffic picks up, tolerance drops. People know that if they look like they're staying, somebody is more likely to tell them to leave, call security, or complain. So they keep it light and quick. Pack up, blend in, disappear. This is one of those moments that makes the title make sense. A random bad night does not create a routine this consistent. A system does. People learn exactly when to move because the clock decides whether they get left alone. The cost shows up later in the day. If you wake up early because you're scared of being noticed, you don't get real sleep. You get broken sleep. Broken sleep makes you forgetful, short-tempered, and slower. It makes appointments harder. It makes work harder. Then someone looks at you and thinks you're unreliable, without seeing the exhaustion behind it. Also, notice how careful people are about leaving a trace. A messy spot brings faster complaints. So even in a bad situation, they're doing cleanup to avoid getting blamed. Follow where people go next, because the next layer is about buying time in plain sight. The Untergrundbahn and Stadtbahn Schnellbahn loop. Most people treat transport spaces like background. You pass through, you don't think about it. But when someone has nowhere private to go, those same spaces become a safety net, even if nobody calls it that. Look at the small choices people make. They sit where they can see both directions. They keep bags pressed tight against their legs. They choose light, not because they want attention, but because witnesses reduce risk. They try to look like they are waiting for a train, not waiting for life to change. The network matters here. It shapes the routine, the timing, and the spots people can use without standing out. In Berlin, this city's network shapes the routine. The Untergrundbahn, usually called the U-Bahn, and the Stadtbahn Schnellbahn, usually called the S-Bahn, make it easy to move, warm up, stay dry, and charge a phone without looking obviously out of place. That's why the loop forms around entrances, platforms, and corridors. What people get wrong is assuming everyone they see there is living in the station. Some are, but many are working and trying to stay close to a job. Many are waiting on papers. Many are trying to hide the situation from family or coworkers. They blend in on purpose, which makes them hard to count. This is also where friction builds. Crowds create tension. Tension creates complaints. Complaints bring staff and security attention. Then people learn a set of unwritten rules: where you can sit, how long you can stay, and how quickly you need to move when someone decides you've been there too long. And here's the quiet part. The stricter the vibe gets, the more people adjust by becoming invisible. That invisibility looks like the problem is smaller until it suddenly shows up somewhere else. If you want to understand why paperwork matters so much, look at what people protect first when they have to move quickly. The plastic folder proof. You will see it everywhere once you start noticing it. A plastic folder, a waterproof sleeve, papers wrapped inside another bag like they are fragile glass. To someone with a stable home, it looks boring. To someone without a stable home, it's the difference between getting out and getting stuck. It can be identity documents, letters, appointment slips, medical papers, work papers, or proof they used to have an address. Here's the part most people don't understand until they see it up close. Losing one document can push you back weeks, sometimes months. Not because someone is lazy, but because systems love paperwork and deadlines. If you lose the proof, you often get sent back to the start. So people guard that folder like it's a lifeline. They keep it dry. They keep it close. If they are told to move, it's one of the first things they grab. Outsiders see clutter. The person living it sees their next chance. This is also why the story is not only about sleep spots. It's about keeping the tools you need to climb out while living in conditions that constantly destroy tools. Rain, theft, sudden moves, and stress all chip away at the basics. If you want to check, you can do yourself. Watch how carefully people handle paper in bad weather. It tells you they're not giving up. They're trying to re-enter a system that keeps moving the goalposts. And once you see that, the endless numbers argument starts to make more sense. If you want more videos like this, subscribe now, because we're tracking how the system turns small delays into long-term homelessness. Why the numbers always feel wrong. People argue about numbers because a big number feels like certainty. The problem is the crisis does not sit still. People move early, move late, rotate locations, and try to look ordinary on purpose. Some sleep on a couch for a short stretch, then it ends, then they are outside again. That is why official systems split homelessness into categories. There are people in temporary accommodation through social support. There are people without accommodation sleeping outside or in makeshift spaces. There is a hidden layer bouncing between short arrangements that never show up in a street count. So here is the grounded version that avoids a fight. You can have tens of thousands in temporary arrangements and still have thousands outside at the same time. Those are not separate stories. They are the same pipeline at different stages. If you want a normal person way to judge the situation, focus on time. How long someone waits for a placement. How long someone stays temporary. How long it takes to replace an identity document. How long the queue is for an appointment. When those waits grow, more people get stuck, and the visible street layer grows too. 2026 matters here as pressure, not as a headline statistic. When temporary stays stretch out, people burn out. They lose jobs, they lose relationships, they stop trusting the process. Then the next fall becomes easier because they are already exhausted. So the next question is simple. How do people end up in the pipeline? Usually, it starts in the most normal way possible, how people slide into it. It often starts with something that sounds fixable. Rent goes up, hours get cut, a relationship ends, a roommate situation breaks, a health problem hits, a repair bill lands at the worst time. Then someone starts doing patchwork, couch for a bit, a friend for a bit, one night outside, then back inside. But patchwork has a limit. Friends get tired, families get stretched, landlords notice. The spare room is not spare anymore. And once you lose housing, you usually lose the thing people forget matters until it is gone, an address. Without an address, mail does not reach you. Without mail, you miss appointments. Without appointments, paperwork stalls. When paperwork stalls, money gets shaky. When money gets shaky, your chance of renting even a small room collapses. Time becomes the enemy. Every queue costs hours. Every delay can mean a missed shift. Every missed shift can mean a missed bill. It is not one big failure. It is a stack of small failures that feed each other. You can also see the pressure in the decisions people make. They choose places based on work routes. They choose routines based on where they can wash, charge a phone, and stay unnoticed. They start acting like their whole life is one long schedule problem. That is why the question, why not just go to a shelter, is not as simple as it sounds. Why shelters can feel like a gamble. A shelter bed can help, and for some people, it is the best option. For others, it can feel like trading one risk for another. Crowded rooms can mean theft. They can mean conflict. They can mean you do not sleep even when you are indoors. Shared spaces can mean sickness spreads fast. Rules can separate couples, make it hard to keep a pet, or break routines someone needs for work. There is also something more basic, control. When your life is shaky, control becomes survival. A familiar spot outside may be miserable, but you know the rules. In a crowded dorm, you do not know who is next to you, what happens to your things, or whether you will be moved again tomorrow. If someone is still trying to work, the math gets harsh. If a place forces you out early, you lose sleep. If you lose sleep, you mess up at work. If you mess up at work, you lose shifts. If you lose shifts, you lose income. And once income drops, exits get even harder. Another fear sits under the surface: losing your last anchor while you are inside. If your documents and your clothes are in a bag, any separation feels dangerous. Some people avoid services because visibility creates vulnerability, so people pick the least bad option. From the outside, that can look stubborn. From the inside, it can feel like the only way to keep the tiny pieces of stability they still have. This is where the crisis gets even harder to see, because a lot of people are still working. The working layer. People miss? A lot of people assume homelessness means someone is not working. That is comforting, because it keeps the problem at a distance. But many people are still employed. They just do not have stable housing. You can often tell by the way they move. They look like commuters because they are commuters. They keep things clean because they have to. They try to blend in because being found out can cost them a job. They plan their day around bathrooms, chargers, and places they can sit without trouble. This layer stays hidden until it spills into public view. Someone's phone dies and they cannot check a shift change. Someone cannot wash a uniform and gets warned at work. Someone loses the folder and misses the appointment. Then the whole fragile setup collapses. It also changes how people use the city. They choose routes that keep them close to work. They choose sleep spots that reduce travel time. They choose staying quiet over asking for help because they think help will label them. That is why the crisis can look smaller than it is. The people closest to falling out of work are trying the hardest to look normal. They are not asking to be seen. They are trying to buy time. Then cold weather hits and the city has to respond. That response saves lives, but it also shows where the bottleneck is. Kältehilfe and the winter loop. You can feel winter pressure building before anyone says it out loud. People huddle tighter. People move faster. People look more exhausted. Nights get harder and the risks go up. That is why Kältehilfe exists, the winter emergency help system. The goal is simple: keep people from dying in the cold. It matters. It saves lives, but it also shows a hard truth. Keeping someone alive is not the same as getting them housed. When exits are slow, winter help can turn into a loop. People get a place for the night, then they are back out, then they are back in, and it repeats. That is survival, not stability. Winter packs people into tight spaces, which can raise conflict and make some people avoid indoor options even when they are offered. Others accept a bed but still do not sleep well because the environment is stressful. Either way, fatigue piles up. Then the season changes and capacity shrinks again. If someone did not get a real exit during winter, they come out the other side more tired, often more sick and still stuck. So if you want to understand why 2026 feels heavier, look at the waiting. Look at how long temporary has become, and look at the part that turns weeks into months. Paperwork. The address and paperwork mess. Most support systems assume you can be reached. They assume you can receive mail. They assume you can store documents safely. They assume you can keep appointments. When you do not have stable housing, those assumptions fall apart fast. If you miss a letter, you miss an appointment. If you miss an appointment, you wait longer. If you wait longer, you stay stuck longer. And the longer you stay stuck, the harder it is to hold on to work, health, and relationships. A lost identity document is a slow disaster. Replacing it takes time, but to replace it, you often need proof. To get proof, you may need letters. To get letters, you need an address. So people borrow addresses, which creates stress because not everyone wants official mail turning up at their door. This is why people pay for storage when they can. It is why they carry papers in plastic. It is why they panic when they are told to move suddenly. Outsiders see mess. The person living it sees weeks of progress at risk. And here is the part that is easy to miss. Every delay has a cost. Miss one appointment, and you may be waiting again while everything else in your life keeps sliding. That is how people get stuck even when they are trying. Once people get stuck, the same spots start to repeat. And when spots repeat, the neighborhood pressure builds. When complaints hit the Bezirksamt, people put up with discomfort until it feels permanent. Then they start reporting it. A sleeping spot becomes a photo. The photo becomes a post. The post becomes a message chain. Then the same complaint lands again and again. Here, that pressure often hits the Bezirksamt. Residents want action. Most are not thinking about housing supply. They are thinking about their entrance, their sidewalk, their corner, and their kids walking past it. And do something usually turns into one thing in practice. Remove the visible problem from the visible place. That is the fastest way to make a corner look calmer. But removal is not resolution. When one area gets cleared, people do not vanish. They move. They end up in the next place where complaints take longer to build, often in darker, riskier spots. So each neighborhood can feel like it fixed the problem, while the citywide problem gets more scattered and more dangerous. That is how out of control grows, not because people multiply overnight, but because the system keeps pushing people around without creating enough exits. And once pushing becomes the reflex, it starts looking like it works, even when it is just moving the problem around. Why crackdowns look like they work? If your goal is make this spot look calm by tomorrow, pressure can work. A corner gets cleared. The complaints slow down. People feel relief. Officials can point to a clean street and call it progress. But that success is mostly a trick of geography. People do not disappear. They relocate. They go to the next wide curb, the next corridor, the next place where complaints take longer to build. That movement makes the city feel unstable because the problem keeps popping up in new places. It also changes behavior in a way that makes things worse. The more people are pushed, the more they hide. They pick darker spots. They avoid outreach. They avoid official places that might put their name on a list. The city then says it cannot see the problem clearly, while the problem is getting riskier. And there is a cost nobody puts on the headline. Constant motion destroys sleep and destroys belongings. It wrecks the routines that keep someone employed. It wipes out the paperwork steps that take people toward an exit. So the next layer is enforcement pressure, the small penalties, and the losses that turn a bad week into a worse month. Ordnungsamt pressure, debt, and loss. Rules do not feel like policy when you are living inside them. They feel like being told to move. Again, public spaces have rules most housed people barely notice. But for someone with nowhere else to go, those rules decide whether you can rest at all. This pressure often shows up through the Ordnungsamt and security staff. It does not have to look dramatic to do damage. The damage is in timing. If you are moved at night, you sleep less. If you sleep less, you struggle more during the day. If you struggle more, you miss work or miss appointments. And once you miss those, you fall further behind. Then the penalties start acting bigger than they look. A fine is not only money, it is time. Time dealing with it. Time lost in queues. Time missed at work. When you are already stretched, time is what you do not have. There is also the constant risk of losing things. If you are told to move fast, you leave things behind. A bag goes missing. A charger disappears. Papers get wet. Medication gets lost. Those losses look small to outsiders. Inside the situation, they can wipe out the week. And here is the kicker. The more pressure there is, the more people hide. They avoid outreach. They avoid help sites. They avoid being seen. Then the city claims it cannot see the problem clearly, which becomes an excuse to push harder instead of building exits faster. So everything comes back to the same choke point. If exits are blocked, the city can only shuffle the problem around, which brings us to the fork in the road. Push people away, hold people in temporary limbo, or actually shorten the pipeline. The exit bottleneck. Here is the simple truth. You cannot clear your way out of a housing problem. You can move it, you can hide it, but you cannot end it without exits. Emergency accommodation can expand. Outreach can grow. Rules can get stricter. None of that solves the crisis if people cannot move into stable housing at a decent speed. When exits are blocked, everything becomes a waiting room. People stay temporary for too long. People outside do not see a path in. People working while homeless burn out. People lose documents and restart the process. The pipeline gets longer. This is where politics gets messy. Fast, visible action is easier than slow, real fixes. Moving people along makes a corner look calmer quickly. Building enough exits takes time, money, and patience. So the city faces a fork. One path is displacement. Push people out of sight, tighten rules, Shrink the space where someone can exist. It looks like order, but it usually raises risk and spreads the problem. Another path is containment. Keep people in temporary systems for long periods, with too few real exits. It looks like help, but it can turn into long-term stuck. The third path is stabilization. Manage low-barrier places that protect sleep and documents, prevention help that arrives fast before someone falls all the way, and real housing exits at enough scale to reduce the pipeline. The tools are not mysterious. What is uncertain is what gets prioritized when the next complaint wave hits. If you want to see what is really being chosen, do not look at speeches. Look at mornings. Look at how fast people pack up. Look at how hard they grip a plastic folder. That is the decision showing up in real life. Berlin's homelessness crisis isn't just what you see on the street. It's the slow jam behind it. Long waits, lost paperwork, and people getting pushed from one spot to the next with no real exit. If you live here, what do you think is driving it most right now? Rent, lack of rooms, slow support, or enforcement pressure? Comment your take, because the details matter and they're different by area. If this breakdown helped you see the pattern more clearly, hit like so more people find it, and subscribe to our channel for the upcoming videos.